Welcome, everyone. Today, we're going to explore the fascinating ways humans think and reason across different fields. This is the first slide, so I want to warmly welcome you all and introduce our topic with enthusiasm. The title of our presentation is Understanding Human Reasoning Processes, and we'll also touch on how reasoning varies across disciplines. Over the course of this presentation, we'll look at various methods and approaches people use to think and make sense of the world. So, let's dive in and discover the diverse ways human reasoning shapes our understanding. Human thinking is not fixed. It's actually quite flexible and adaptable. There are multiple reasoning styles that people use, depending on the situation or even their personality. And what's interesting is that in real life, we often combine these different styles rather than sticking to just one. This highlights how dynamic and nuanced our thought processes really are. Understanding this variability is key to appreciating how we solve problems and make decisions across different contexts. It ties back to the overall theme that thinking isn't a one-size-fits-all process, but a complex interplay of approaches. Let's take a closer look at the structure of deductive reasoning, which is often described as rule, case, and conclusion. First, we start with a general rule or principle. For example, all metals expand when heated. This rule sets the foundation for our reasoning. Next, we look at a specific case that fits this rule, such as iron is a metal. By identifying this case as part of the rule, we can logically connect the two. Finally, based on the rule and the case, we draw a conclusion. Therefore, iron expands when heated. This is the logical outcome of applying our rule to the particular case. This top-down approach is fundamental in logical reasoning because it allows us to make clear and justified conclusions from general principles. It's a very effective way to structure arguments and understand how evidence connects to broader concepts. Throughout this presentation, we see how this method helps us analyze and build sound reasoning processes. Let's look at how observations lead us to identify patterns, which then help us draw conclusions. For example, if we notice that the sun rises every day, we can reasonably predict that it will rise again tomorrow. This process is called inductive reasoning, often described as a bottom-up approach. We start with specific observations, like the sunrise, and from those, we infer a general pattern that the sun rises daily. This pattern then helps us make conclusions about future events, even if we haven't directly observed them yet. It's a powerful way to understand the world around us by moving from what we see to what we can expect. Throughout this presentation, we'll see how this method underpins many of our everyday decisions and scientific discoveries. Let's look at this example. Ground is wet, so probably it rained. This simple scenario illustrates an important reasoning process called abductive reasoning. Abductive reasoning involves starting with an observation or a set of observations, and then trying to find the best explanation for them. It's like being a detective, piecing together clues to arrive at the most plausible cause. The key point here is that abductive reasoning isn't about certainty. It's about making the best possible guess based on the evidence we have. This kind of reasoning is really useful in everyday life and scientific inquiry because it helps us form hypotheses when we don't have complete information. Remember, it's about finding the most reasonable explanation among several possibilities, which ties into the larger theme of how we interpret and make sense of the world around us. When we think about fast, automatic, experience-based thinking, we're talking about those quick judgments and decisions we make without even realizing it. It's what happens when recognizing danger occurs almost instantly, like reacting before your mind even has time to process what's happening. It's also how we make quick moves in chess, those instinctive responses based on pattern recognition and experience. This kind of thinking is often called intuitive reasoning because it relies on our past experiences stored in our subconscious. It allows us to make rapid decisions in complex situations without needing to analyze every detail consciously. Overall, these quick, automatic responses are essential. They help us navigate the world efficiently and often effectively. They connect to the broader theme of how our minds operate in both deliberate and instinctive ways, balancing speed and accuracy depending on the situation. Let's talk about slow, structured thinking. When approaching complex problems, it's important to follow a clear set of steps that help us analyze thoroughly. The first step is observation, where we carefully gather information and notice details without jumping to conclusions. Next is analysis, in which we break down what we've observed to understand the underlying factors. After that comes evaluation, where we assess the significance of our findings and consider different perspectives. Then, verification is crucial. It's about double-checking our conclusions to ensure they are accurate and reliable. Throughout this process, analytical reasoning ties everything together. It helps us connect the dots logically and make well-informed decisions. By following this structured approach, we ensure our thinking is deliberate and thorough, which is essential for making sound judgments and solving problems effectively. When we talk about thinking, we're really focusing on a process called reflective or meta-reasoning. It's about stepping back and examining how we're approaching problems and making decisions. For example, one key step is checking our bias. We all have unconscious biases that can influence our thinking, so it's important to be aware of them and question whether they are affecting our conclusions. Next, we should question our assumptions. Sometimes we take certain ideas for granted without really scrutinizing them, which can lead us astray. Challenging these assumptions helps us develop more accurate and reliable thinking. Revising our conclusions is also a crucial part of this process. As we gather new information or reflect on our reasoning, it's important to be flexible and willing to change our minds if needed. Overall, the core idea here is to adopt a reflective mindset, constantly evaluating and refining our thought process. This self-awareness and critical evaluation are what make our reasoning more robust and ultimately lead to better decisions. As we move through this presentation, keep in mind that thinking about thinking enhances our ability to think clearly and make sound judgments. When we talk about real thinking, it's actually a process that involves several key steps working together. It starts with observation, where we notice the details and gather initial information. Then, we move into intuition, which is that gut feeling or instinct that helps us make early sense of what we've seen. Next comes analysis, where we dig deeper, breaking down the information to understand it better. After that, we evaluate the options or ideas, weighing their pros and cons. Following evaluation, we gather evidence, facts, data, or examples that support or challenge our thinking. This evidence then helps us arrive at a conclusion, which is our final understanding or decision. The key insight here is that real thinking isn't just about jumping to conclusions. It's a dynamic, iterative process. It connects observation and intuition to analysis and evidence, leading us to well-founded conclusions. This process is fundamental because it ensures our decisions are thorough, balanced, and grounded in reality, something we all need to master to improve our problem-solving and decision-making skills. There is no single correct path when it comes to solving complex problems or making decisions. What works best often depends on the situation, the goals, and the resources available. That's why I emphasize that the best thinking combines multiple methods. By blending different approaches, we can adapt more effectively and find innovative solutions. And with that, we come to the conclusion. Remember, flexibility and openness to multiple strategies are key. No one method has all the answers, so stay curious and willing to experiment. This wraps up our discussion, and I hope you take away the importance of diverse thinking in your own work. Thank you.